I don't run into people who can analyze a play well.
Mhm.
I don't know anybody I've ever run into who can do what I was trained to do.
You were trained by your teachers at the university.
Right.
They had that ability, right?
They knew what it was, yeah.
Yeah.
And by the way, I've gone further than just their teaching. In the practice of doing it, I was talking to my major professor long time after I had left there.
Your directing professor.
My major professor, the head professor of my graduate committee.
Right.
I didn't study directing with him. I studied playwriting with him.
Mm-hmm.
But this was after I was already teaching at Lee's. And I went back and was talking to him. And he's the one of the people who taught me how to do certain things, because in the playwriting classes, you have to know how to encode lines and so forth like that.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to know all the things that I've been talking about that the director has to find out. And we had a disagreement. He thought plays could be interpreted in more than one way. Throughout history, they've been interpreted in all different ways. I said, yeah, and all those, that one of those was closer to right, and all the rest were misinterpretations.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, no, you can't say that. You have to have the artist have some freedom. I said, no, the play is a particular thing. So I've gone past even some of the things I learned. I didn't learn only from him, by the way.
Yeah.
In the oral interpretation classes, as I told you, we're not oral interpretation standing behind a podium and reading a poem with feeling.
Yeah.
No, we stage them that these are things that real people are saying in certain circumstances. Just like a play is supposed to be a real person saying this,
And just like
not
we
a character.
just like we did with Dover Beach.
Yes. So when you can do that with Dover Beach, it's easier to do it with Dial M for Murder because of various things.
Mm-hmm.
You're told more about what the plot is. You're given more clues in the names of the person, the age,
Right.
all those other things. From all of those things that you find out what the reality of a play is, you're given in a play. You're not given it in a poem. So once you can do it in a poem, you can certainly do it in a play. So through those processes, working in various things with various of those teachers, I learned how to take apart a play.
Right.
In directing things since I graduated, and with this recognition, an author doesn't write a message so that you'll take it a different way. And you can take writing back from all of the different kinds of writing. I mean, back in history, you can step back from the most complicated writing, which is poem, to the next most complicated, which is drama, to the next most complicated, which is novel, to the next most complicated, which is short story, to the next least complicated.
Yeah. What's the most complicated poem?
Poem is the most complicated.
Then drama
Then drama is second to most.
Yeah.
Then third in the line
is novel.
is a novel. Then fourth is short story. Then fifth is a journalistic or essay-like account. Then sixth is note you might send to your mother or your cousin, a letter, just correspondence. Seventh is like a list. And all of those things, when you write something down, you mean that. You're writing a list of groceries. I need butter, eggs, celery, bacon, and toilet paper. You send somebody to the store. They're not supposed to interpret your list so that they come back now with milk, baking powder, hand washing soap.
toilet paper, but I know you really meant.
So that's a simplistic level. Everybody would agree that what somebody writes, they meant.
Yeah.
All right. The next level, I said, is a letter. Dear Mom, camp is not as good as I thought. I have a real jerk who sleeps in the bunk above me, and I wish you were dead. And then what do you do in the letter? You go, parenthesis, not really, parenthesis. You don't want your mother to say from that, I read this letter, he's having a wonderful time at camp. There's no other interpretation of that.
Mm-hmm.
There's only an analysis of what does it say. And in that sense, the analysis is very easy because the person is just telling you what they really feel.
Mm-hmm.
And when they say something, I wish he was dead, they indicate to you that they don't literally mean it. But this is how I feel. He drives me nuts.
Mm-hmm.
That's what the ha-ha not really means.
Right.
So there's nothing in the ha-ha not really, which is not taking back and showing you that I don't mean the previous thing literally.
Right.
It can't be perceived of in any other way.
So when your teacher was saying, no, you have to allow for the artistry for the interpretation of the artist, he's talking about the artist that's interpreting the piece, not the artist that wrote it. As if you have to somehow be beholden to the interpreter, which you don't have to be.
No,
you have to be beholden to the
interpreter,
to the artist.
It's because
to the creator.
Well, my interpretation is, that's just as good as someone else. Fuck you, it's not as good. When you come back with the wrong 5 elements from the store, you have not done the trip to the store. When you read the letter saying, my son is actually having a wonderful time at camp, and he's such a comedian, then you have misread the letter. Now, what's next from that?
Next from that was short story.
No, essays.
Oh, essays.
Journalistic essay.
Forgot about the essays.
Journalism, you pick up the New York Times at 2 p.m. yesterday, the 39th or whatever he was, President of the United States, resigned from office in disgrace because of the Watergate scandal. How are you going to interpret that differently? Now, an essay. Do you know the essay by, I think it's Jonathan Swift, called A Modest Proposal?
Mm-mm.
In London, there was a lot of poverty and not a lot of food. And certain people had a lot of money and other people didn't have any. So a modest proposal is, in that element, we're also having too many children. So his proposal is, we should kill the children and eat them so that everybody has enough food and we don't have too many
Kill
children.
2 birds with 1 stone. Exactly.
Now, that's not literal, obviously. A modest proposal already tells you, when he's saying we should kill the children and eat them, there's no modesty in that. That's pretty blatant and pretty out there. It means he doesn't mean it. But he's trying to talk about the sociological circumstances and how they're being mismanaged by the inequities of society.
Mm-hmm.
You're supposed to get from that.
Is that what's called tongue-in-cheek?
Yeah.
When he says, let's eat the children.
What is it actually?
Is it...
in literary terminology.
Is it satire?
It's irony.
Irony.
It's satire, but it's through irony.
Mm-hmm.
Which means, I don't mean this.
Mm-hmm.
So, there's no interpretation of that essay which would allow you to think he wants people actually to kill and eat the children. It's a total misinterpretation.
Because you're taking him literally. You're taking what he writes literally.
Then it wouldn't be a modest proposal.
And you're not.
He'd have to be an imbecile. He'd have to be a madman to think that was a modest proposal.
You're missing the ha-ha.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's only one way to interpret that. Now we go to short story. The only difference, by the way, in short story and novel is that a novel is more complicated, more characters, more events, so it makes it a higher level of...
Why is the drama more complicated to the novel?
I'll get to that. This all has to do with analysis, so it all has to do with directing, so it doesn't hurt that we're taking the time. Next thing up is a short story. Alma was the daughter of a Tennessee Williams short story called The Yellow Bird. The Yellow Bird. Alma was the daughter of a Protestant minister named Increase Tutwiler. Now, from that, we're supposed to read Alma was the mother of an Episcopal choir boy named William Penn. There's no other way to read it. Alma was the daughter of a Protestant minister named Increase Tutwiler. Right. That is what event happened.
Yeah.
And this happened to her, and that happened to her, and the other thing happened to her.
Mm-hmm.
And what that short story is about is, Summer and Smoke?
Mm-hmm. Alma, yeah. John.
It's Alma not going by what the father wants. The short story is Alma doing what she wants. So she starts smoking. And the father comes in and slaps it out of her face. You don't smoke in this house. She goes upstairs, Next time she comes down, she's smoking and cigarette and all made up too. And she says, I'm going to live the life I want. And if you people don't like it, fine, I'll live it somewhere else. And she leaves and goes down and to New Orleans, lives in New Orleans, becomes a prostitute, but not a street prostitute, a woman who has many men in her life who they give her favors, and she lives by that and so forth. And she has a child who's a magnificent young blonde child who she loves and so forth. She has the most wonderful, magical life because she doesn't do what Alma in the play does, which is just
Listen
do what
to
the
her
father says.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Now, there's no reading of that story which says Alma really didn't do this. She really didn't have those things. There's nothing in it to make you think this is not so.
Mm-hmm.
So how can you interpret it any other way than what it says?
There's no ha-ha, so why shouldn't you take... Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's not only why shouldn't you, how can you take it any other way?
Right.
A novel is the same thing. It was a blustery early afternoon in May, and all the clocks were striking 13. Winston Smith went across that's 1984. Not exactly, but now. What are you supposed to think from that? Well, first of all, if the clocks were striking 13, we're in a different time than we are now. Not, somebody had a wacky clock, and their clock struck 13. No, it says all the clocks were striking 13. So it's already a different time because clocks only, so far in history, only go up to 12, and then they start over at 1. And even when you use military time, 1600, 1800, clocks don't bong, 18 bongs. There's no interpretation. But this is a different world than the one we're used to. And let me, as I watch this, see what that world is like. One interpretation of that novel, and one only, is possible. The narrator, by the way, is not capable in narrative material of being interpreted. He just tells you.
You're talking about a novel?
In a novel or short story, narrative material.
Mm-hmm.
He tells you what it is. He doesn't tell you so that you're supposed to think it's something else. In Elmer Gantry, when Elmer Gantry is first introduced, he talks about how strong and big and burly-haired and everything. He said he had a big, booming voice. He was born to be a senator. He never said anything important, and he always said it sonorously. That's humorous because he says senators ought never say anything important. But what he's trying to do is give you a sense of how he behaved. This is the very first. He's not a genuine person. He always saying everything, big, booming voice, and sonorously. It's already telling you what his character was like without saying he was phony, liked to hear himself talk. He thought everything he said was important and should be heard because he was saying it. No, he tells you what I just said by using an artistic way of telling it. There's no other interpretation. It wasn't that he was a political person at heart. He wanted to be a senator. So happens life took him somewhere else. Mm-hmm. That's not at all what it means. There's only one interpretation possible about what does the author mean when he says that. So that way we get a sense of him, and we get a little chuckle at the expense of senators. Nobody's supposed to say that's not a humorous description. There's no interpretation possible for that. Now, we'll skip over plays for a moment. Now, when we go to a poem, oh, my love's like a red, red rose that's newly sprung in June. It's not literal. My love is not a plant. My love is not skinny with a green stem as a body, with prickly points sticking off, with a deep red head made of... No, that's not what it means. What does it mean?
It's a metaphor.
Right. But it's not to be taken some other way. We're not supposed to say from that, gee, there's more interpretations to this. What actually I think he's saying is that his, if it's like a red, red rose newly sprung in June, newly sprung means just opened. And from that, what I take is his love was babyfied. No, it means fresh and alive. That's the person he loves is like that.
What was it about babyfied?
Newly sprung, just born.
Mm-hmm.
You don't read just born to mean infantile.
Mm-hmm.
You don't read just born to mean childlike.
Mm-hmm.
Newly sprung is not childlike or babyfied or infantile. It's fresh. Freshly opened in June. If they open, by the way, in August, it's not the same freshness. It's not the first buds of the spring. If it starts to bud, it's a little too early. And so probably doesn't bloom fully as it should. Something comes up too early, it may open partially, may die before it opens fully, but June, perfect. Perfect time. Oh, my love is like what? Exquisite, wonderful, fresh, alive. It's not a chrysanthemum. It's not a tulip. There's a full-bodiedness in a rose. It's substantial. It's not like a lily. You touch it, it falls over. Full-bodied, strong. There's no way to interpret that poem other than one. So in any kind of way that men have ever written, if there's only one interpretation of that possible, should we say, well, when an author sits down to write, there's many interpretations possible. Why should they be people whose work to try to put something down should be at the whim of the interpreter?
Right. So if somebody interprets a passage differently than someone else, one has to be accurate, and one
they
has
can
to
both be mistaken
that's
and just different.
That's right. Yeah. But in other words,
the probability is one will be closer to accurate than the other.
Right.
But I've seen many times things done several different ways, totally missed
the mark. Yeah.
Yeah. Singers do it all the time.
Meaning they don't quite hit the note? They don't
No, not in singing. They don't interpret the material.
Oh, I see. They sing the song, but they don't interpret the material. They're singing it, but they're not acting it.
Yeah. Why would anybody like Bob Dylan? He can't sing worth shit. And although when he was young, he didn't have a singing voice. Tangled up in blue, he'll say. There was a period of time, because he was so awash in drugs and idiocy, you can't understand what he's saying.
So then I take
literally,
he got better.
He got off of all of that shit. He was saved by something in his life, so that now, when you hear him, it still has too much of the in it.
Right.
But it's clearer, and you can get what he's talking about. Why would you want to listen to him? Because the songs he sings mostly are his own songs. I heard him talk about his first album. As soon as it was out, he didn't like it because he sang other people's songs. Woody Guthrie and other things were on
His first album was covers?
He did not all covers, but had some.
Yeah.
And he said he was sorry that he had made his first album now.
Oh.
Because it wasn't his soul.
Yeah.
The answer to why anybody would like to listen to Bob Dylan is he interprets his own songs. When you hear his voice, you get the song. There was a famous recording. Hey, Mr. Tambourine Man, play that song for me. I think it was the Byrds or somebody. Totally misrepresenting the song. It's all, she loves you, yeah, yeah, yeah. Hey, Mr. Tambourine Man, play a song for me. That's not what it's about. That's not what, when Bob Dylan sings, you hear something about the Tambourine Man. That, by the way, is lighter than, but not far from Mr. Bojangles. He has a feeling about the Tambourine Man, and that this is the way the Tambourine Man deals with life.
What was that you said about Bojangles?
You know the song Mr. Bojangles?
Yeah. So it's similar.
But it's that same kind of quality.
Similar quality, yeah.
It's like this Mr. Bojangles was sung by all kinds of groups. I didn't like this guy as a singer. But when Sammy Davis Jr. sang that song, it's the only time you get the song. Down and out, poverty-stricken black man who couldn't do anything to make money but shuffle. And so when he sings it, it's with pathos. I knew a man, Bojangles, and he'd dance a lick with worn-out shoes. You know what the shoes worn out mean. This man doesn't have anything in life. Mm-hmm. He has nobody. He has nobody to love, nobody to care about him, nothing but that he can shuffle.
And make a little money.
Make a little money.
They throw coins at him.
Yeah. So when Sammy Davis Jr., being a black man, singing that song about a black man, he knows what it is. And when you hear that song, you get Mr. Bojangles. The other people are just singing a song. It can be, Ring Around the Rosie. It could be anything else. It's not Mr. Bojangles. Mm-hmm. And songs really are only poems to music. Mm-hmm. So they're done the same way poetry is done.
Yeah.
It's, oh, my love's like a red, red rose that's newly sprung in June. Means something that I feel about my love, that I'm trying to let you know about the person I'm in love with, that the person is fresh and young and vibrant and wonderful. There's nothing better than. There's no other interpretation possible. Anything else is a misinterpretation. So there's no reason for a piece of drama that we're supposed to say, well, everybody else who writes anything else in the world, that's not capable of interpretation. That only means what it says. But dramatists are schmucks, so we're going to take them as kind of, they didn't know what they were doing, but we'll make it into whatever we want to make it into. Why them? What is it about their piece of writing? What are they doing that's different? They're not doing anything different. They're sitting down. I feel something. I want people to get it. What I feel. And I have to encode that because I don't want it to be an essay, because people don't listen to an essay. They either do or they don't. But you don't pull people in intellectually. But that doesn't mean...
You can't pull people in through their intellect.
Right. Pull them into the experience through their intellect. They're pulled in, as we've said, by what they feel when they're watching something.
More the psyche, right?
Yeah, they're pulled in through the psyche. And that makes them experience what you want to experience. And then when they analyze their experience, if they do, then they're aware of what they actually felt. But the feeling is what causes behavior, not the intellect. And therefore they will behave differently having gone through certain things, even if they don't realize that's what they've gone through. So for instance, if you're doing a message movie or a message play.
But aren't all movies message plays and all?
No, by message I mean you're supposed to do this way in life. You're supposed to treat these people this way. They're didactic. They're teaching a lesson.
Yeah.
When you do that, and they say, this is what should happen when you are dealing with an enemy in warfare.
Right.
Some people say, no, that's not what you're supposed to. Other people say, well, yeah, it's, I guess. Other people say, goddamn right. Because they all have different prejudices about what an enemy is, whether they're human or not. Does the fact that they've attacked you give you the right to obliterate them from the earth? There are different ways of thinking about that. So it's not just something that I can preach about. But if I want you to know that even if the person is supposedly your enemy, they're a human being, I write Guests of the Nation, which is a short story about the IRA, these IRA guys who catch this English soldier, and they have to kill him because he's the enemy. But they keep him for a while before they decide what to do with him. The guy who has to kill him doesn't want to kill him. Now he knows him because he sees him every day. This is now a human being. And so when we have Guests of the Nation, prisoners in war, if you read that, you get, it's not the human thing to murder them, to torture them. They're human beings too. They were told to go do this just the way. Now, the quandary for the person who has to kill him now is, I'm being told to do something by the people on my side. I'm on their side. But the people who, I'm just a private, they're sergeants, they're telling me I got to kill this guy. It's not right to kill him.
But he's not any different than we are.
Right. He was sent over there.
Under different circumstances, we could have been best friends.
Yes.
Is that a short story?
Yeah. Guests of the Nation.
Ever made into
Frank,
a film?
I don't know if it has or not.
Yeah, be interesting.
So, there's no reason to think that the author of a drama is any different from any other author. He feels something. He wants it not just to be a transitory thought that flits through his mind. So he writes it down. Now, besides writing it down, just so I'll remember it, he actually wants to communicate that to other people. So he writes it down for people to read, not just I write it down. When you write the list of things that I want bought from the store, you want the person to read it and do those things. The most simplistic writing that's possible, probably, is a list like that. You want them to buy those things. There's no other interpretation possible. So the person now who's going to write a play says, if you have two people who get married because one person is a beautiful young girl who's like the capturable prize of the most popular at school, pretty, so forth, vivacious, every boy wants her, and you want her for that reason,
Right.
so you try to marry her. And you have a girl who is vivacious and loves, one of the reasons she's vivacious at school and is popular is because she can live there. At home, she's squelched. Something in her lifetime at home has her in a certain circumstance. She can't be herself at home. So she's got to get away from home. So the one who wants her for a prize and the girl who wants to get away from home meet.
Right.
And they marry.
Right.
Except I don't think that's a good way for people to meet and marry.
Right. She's marrying for her reason of escaping. He's marrying for his reason of trophy, wife.
Right. Okay. So that's what I want to write about.
Mhm.
So now I start to write it. That means I want somebody else to come and read it and think this is about a guy and a girl who love each other desperately. They are each other's soulmate. And therefore, the fact that she needs things that he gives and he needs things she gives fits together like pieces of jigsaw puzzle. It's wonderful. They're going to have a great life together. That's a possible interpretation of those things that we've talked about so far. Is that what you want? But you're a dramatist. So, since it's drama, I get to interpret it however I want to, right? There's absolutely no reason to think that drama is any different in nature, that its message is more applicable to interpretation than is a list of I need Clorox, soup, blah, 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 5 things.
Mm-hmm.
That is not open to interpretation. None of the levels of writing are open to interpretation. They're open to analysis. So you can see, what does my love's like a red, red rose signify?
Mm-hmm.
What does it mean? You have to analyze to see, because it's just not straightforward. So
Was there a point in time where you thought plays could have more than one analysis, and you came to realize?
I never felt it was right.
Yeah.
And nobody taught me that it was right.
Right.
Because all of our work was an analysis of what's there.
Of what's there, yeah. Nobody said to you.
But nobody said in the way that I said it to my major professor later, look, no, it can only have one thing. He said, well, throughout history, in The Merchant of Venice, Shylock was often played with a red wig, and red was a comedian's thing. So they must have meant it for comedy purposes. So that's a different interpretation. I said, no, those are misinterpretation.
Shylock is not for comedy.
No, of course not. So if it was played as comedy before, those people were misinterpreting what Shakespeare means, or what the play means.
Would you interpret that as Shakespeare pointing out the injustice of the time, the anti-Semitism?
Yes.
Yeah, he's not being anti-Semitic. He's pointing out,
of course,
what the anti-Semites
and how do you know that?
are.
How do you know that?
Because if you look at the play, there's sensitivity for the character of Shylock, inherent in the play.
Whose sensitivity? Because actually what everybody does is show him to be wrong to want his pound of flesh. He's an ogre.
Mm-hmm.
He wants a pound of flesh. They don't deal with that by saying, here is somebody who doesn't want a pound of flesh, really.
He's making a point.
He does want it because I've been fucked over so much.
How do you
I am now going to stuff it down your throat.
How do you like it when I do it to you?
Yes.
Right.
That's the whole point of the pound of flesh.
But when he's forced to...
He has a speech.
Yeah.
I don't remember any of the speech.
Do I not hurt it?
If you prick me, do I not bleed?
Right.
That's like, I'm a human just like you are a human.
Mm-hmm. And at the end of the
play... And therefore
play,
I should be dealt with.
And at the end of the play, isn't he forced to renounce his religion?
Yes.
Which is not Shakespeare's intention for everybody to go, yes, he got his... But it's actually to say...
The people who made him do this as part of their punishment for his desire, he loses the criminal case.
That's right.
What happens is Portia says, look, I'm going to give you one more chance. Have mercy on Antonio. Don't seek the pound of flesh.
Mm-hmm.
Because the quality of mercy is not strained, my lord.
Mm-hmm.
It droppeth from the heaven like a gentle rain, falling on the just and the unjust. Which means we should be merciful to the just and the unjust. Mercy is not just given to somebody in a just position. So even though you have been treated unjustly and you feel justified in doing this back, hitting back, you're capable of the same mercy that the just or the unjust. Makes no difference. Mercy is not strained, my lord.
Right. Now, he's incapable of pulling it back, right?
Yes.
He's incapable of showing mercy, right?
Right. He's incapable of doing it because he's been pushed too far. Because earlier on when he says, Am I not human? If you prick me, do I not bleed? He doesn't get anywhere with that.
Because of the prejudices of the time. The anti-Semitism.
Right. The whole point of Othello, and known by Iago, and therefore able for him to manipulate Othello, is when he is given the daughter, he's a black man.
Mm-hmm.
He's given the daughter of
a white man.
A white man. Well, what American history, the worst thing a black man could do is want a white woman.
Mm-hmm.
The whole thing of his being given Desdemona is you're not a heathen, you're not subhuman, you're a human being like everybody else. Right. And to prove it, here. The whole point of that in that play is, for Othello, I'm accepted. They accept me. I'm one of them by taking Desdemona. Now, if Desdemona is fucking a white guy, you've been rejected. The worst thing is not to perennially be rejected. That's bad. But to come out of total years and years and a lifetime of rejection into acceptance. Whew. Thank God I'm accepted. And now you're rejected?
By your own wife.
By your own wife. Then you kill her. You can't do anything else. So, he's gone too far. He's been hurt too deeply.
Now, Iago is smart enough and clever enough to play that part.
Yes.
To play that.
Yeah. That's why
he understands
Iago is a Machiavellian.
He understands character. Othello's Achilles heel.
Sure. The thing is that when they were on the battlefield, they were a two-headed team.
Mm-hmm.
Iago has given much counsel to Othello.
Mm-hmm.
Othello owes a lot of his success to Iago.
Right.
Not totally, but a lot of it.
And he refers to him as honest Iago throughout the play repeatedly.
Yeah, because he thinks that this is somebody, through all the wars, I could always depend on what he said. He would always tell me the truth. If I said, look, tomorrow we're going to hit him just after daybreak, he'd say, you're a fool if you hit him after daybreak. You're the general, I'm not. But you're a fool if you hit him after daybreak. You got to hit him before daybreak. Because then they won't even know what time of night it is. They'll be all discombobulated, and they'll be coming out of a sleep. When you come somebody out of sleep, just if you wake up your mother out of a sleep and she didn't expect it, she's disoriented. So now that's where to get them. Oh yeah, you're right. I wanted them to see and fear us coming. Mm-hmm. But no, you're right, it's even better. I don't care if they fear us, they'll be dead.
Yeah, and also, good. Iago doesn't just kiss my ass because I'm the boss. He tells me
exactly.
The truth. Yeah.
He tells me, so
yeah,
I
he's
trust
not a
him.
yes man.
I trust him. Now we come back. Who says, Iago, what a wonderful job you did in the war?
No one. Zero.
Who says, we're giving her Desdemona, her cousin Portia will give to you.
He gets Zippo.
Nothing.
Zippo, yeah. And he gets passed up for Cassio for the lieutenantship, which he
That happens later.
Yeah.
Now, I get back. First of all, nobody says, good job, Iago.
Mm-hmm.
Although I'm almost as responsible as he is.
Mm-hmm.
And tactically, I may be more responsible for the win than he is.
Right.
But he was the general. I was just the adjutant or whatever.
Yeah.
And therefore, what am I, chopped liver? One thing I know, these assholes don't appreciate me, but Othello certainly does. He realizes that I helped him win. He realizes how valuable I am. So when it comes time for a promotion, and then what happens?
He promotes Cassio.
For all of these things, there's no other interpretation possible. Now, there is a reason why people think they can do this about drama, and they cannot do it about lists, and they cannot do it about news stories, and they cannot do it about essays, and they cannot do it about short stories, and they cannot do it about novels, and they cannot do it about poetry.
Even poetry, people think, because I thought poetry, they think that also can be interpreted, right?
They think a little bit because in poetry,
it's what it means to you.
It's a poetic image.
Yeah, it's what it means to you.
No, the author has a specific, as I said before, oh, my love's like a nice warm tulip that came out the other day.
Right.
Not the same thing.
A lot of people think, no, it's how the poetry affects me. That's what's important.
The thing is it is how the poetry affects them, except they have to be aware of how it affects them.
Right.
And how they think it affects them is not how it affects them. They have to analyze it properly, then they'll recognize how it affects them.
Right.
but how they think it affects them and what they think it is about without analysis. They don't know what the
So
fuck
it may
they're
affect
talking
two
about.
different people differently, but it still has the same meaning. It still has one
It
analysis.
won't affect them differently substantively if they get the poem. There are classes in art appreciation. What is that for? That's only ways to teach you to decode the painting, decode the sculpture.
Mm-hmm.
What is this supposed to mean? And throughout most of history, that was viable. When you get to the 20th century, where they say, if I call it a sculpture, it's a sculpture, even though what it is a pile of shit, literally. It's my shit sculpture. It's not a metaphor, it's just a thing, like a five-pronged silver thing sitting in the middle of Central Park. Not a metaphor, it's just a manipulated piece of metal. That's sculpture. No, it's not really sculpture, actually. It's not a metaphor, so it's not sculpture. Why the person is taught those things is to find out what this sculpture, a real piece of sculpture, really means. What are we supposed to get from the thinker? What are we supposed to get? Why is it named the thinker? Why is it a guy's tired so he rests his head on his hand?
You mean those art appreciation courses are meant
Yes.
to teach that? Yeah.
What they're to do is to get you to see what the author's trying to do.
Mhm.
And by author, I mean painter, sculptor, or whoever. The people who say, what does it do to me, first of all, don't know what it's doing to them. And they certainly don't know how it's doing it to them. But if you sat with them and asked them about each thing and made them be specific about what they really felt, they would have the same response as somebody else has. By same, I mean in essence, the same.
You know, the essence is the same, but then it might vibrate differently because they're a different instrument.
Not differently. In other words, not substantively differently, but a little more vibration in a more sensitive person, a little less and a little less. But fear is fear. Look,
And their
if
experience.
every human being didn't experience life in essentially the same way, you couldn't talk to anyone. There would be no communication possible. We cannot communicate with beetles or cockroaches. With human beings, it's not the same thing, you can't talk to them. You could never tell somebody, you're the one for me out of everybody in the world. That's what I mean. So I tell them I love them. If they don't know what you're talking about, I say, what? So what? You love me? So what? What am I supposed to do with that?
Mm-hmm.
Now, there are variations of that, just like there are variations of the color yellow. But every yellow is yellow. Every fear is fear. Every sexual passion is passion. It's the same thing that they experience in essence. So the people doing those things, what it makes me feel is the problem is they don't know what it makes them feel because they're so presumptuous in this, I'm going to take it my way
Right.
bullshit, that they're not even really getting what they're supposed to get. Now, when you say, why is the dramatist the only one where people have, except for a little bit what you said about poetry, which are presumptuous, stupid people who don't really know poetry. But generally speaking, no English professor anywhere would teach you that there are multiple appropriate analyses of Stopping by the Woods of the Snowy Evening or Wild Swans that Cool or any significant piece of poetry that's studied. Nobody would ever say it's open to multiple interpretations. They may say, this passage is not clear. It means the author didn't write it well. Whatever he was at, we didn't get. And since poetry is so very subjective, much of it is written not very well. It doesn't convey openly, directly, what it is the person really means by it. So the poem is badly written. That's all it is to it. But when it's written well, you get it. There's nothing in Dover Beach to think that this is two old men talking about world wars.
No. So why do they feel that a play?
They do it only with a play. Well, why? A play is encoded. A play is encoded. A play is not straightforward. I don't have my characters come out and say, it really makes me mad when you do such and such. And that's what I mean. And the other person says, oh, yeah? Well, it makes me mad when you do such and such.
And
That's
George and Martha, they don't come out and say, well, our marriage is a lie. And so therefore we have to kill the lie. Okay, thank you, ladies
Or
and
even,
gentlemen.
they don't even say, the first time she says anything about the child, is that she mentioned it at the party.
Mm-hmm.
And they're back home now, and he says,
He says, "Don't bring up the bit about the kid."
yeah,
Right.
right. What are you, one of your goddamn students or something, the bit about the kid? I'll talk about any goddamn thing I goddamn want to. Because she's already been drinking and everything else.
Mm-hmm.
A play is written to put people on the stage. None of these other things is for that purpose. When you are told in a narrative what the person is thinking, you're told she thought now she would never get away from him unless she killed him. You're told that. That means that's what she thinks.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to the hardware store. I'll be back in 30 minutes. What does that mean? She's going to get poisoned or a saw or she's going to get a hatchet to hack his head off. It's not, now I'm saying this, and the people reading it think, what the fuck is she going to the hardware store all of a sudden? No, you're told right before that. She was thinking this. In a play, you're not told that. The person just comes on and says, I'm going to the hardware store. So somebody reading it, if they just read it for interest, may not get that. People everywhere you see reading novels. Everywhere. On the train, you never see anybody, unless they're taking a class, reading a play. Plays are not designed to be read. You have to have a script in a play, because that's the only way I can hold on to, this is what I meant, you know? In other words, it's a permanent copy, so therefore we have a script. But it's not meant to be read. There's no play written that's meant to be read. It's meant to be performed. And what the person who's writing a play knows is that when I put this on stage, these are people. They're not my ideas of people. They're not my narrative version of people. They are real people. And what's true about people? They never say what they mean.
Never?
Never. They only say what they're feeling in relation to the circumstances that they're in for that moment. Even when they're giving information.
They only say what they're feeling in relation to
the circumstances that they're in at that moment. Here's an example. What I'm doing now is teaching a course in directing. I'm giving you a lot of information. I'm not giving it to you informationally. I want you to see it. And in the progress of that, I think about things that other people do which I hate. And you hear I hate it. Even when I'm only really trying to give you something informational, you know what I feel about it. You don't just know what I think about it. Because everything that I'm saying now is colored by what I feel about it.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that I agreed to do this shows what? Shows that I care about this.
Mm-hmm.
Why would I take the time to do this otherwise?
Mm-hmm. I
I care about it, and I think it's beneficial if somebody else, especially somebody who's directing, will live up to the material fully. So for that, I'm interested in doing it. In that sense, I'm kind of a laid back, but nonetheless minister of this information. I'm not just telling you information. It's important to me that other people know this who care about it, who will do it responsibly.
So when you say you're not just, you never say what you mean. Is that the way you phrased it? People never say what they mean. That's what you said, right? Yeah.
They never just say what they mean. If Diane came in and said,
element.
Now, I'm going to the store to get dinner, even if she didn't intend it, there would be an undercurrent of, it's 7:35. When are we going to eat? Because that's the situation. But what would she say? I'm going to the store to get dinner. Or, aren't we going out to dinner tonight? She wouldn't be saying, stop the class. She would be meaning, I don't want to eat at 10 o'clock. Can we move this along?
Right.
Now, she's not usually that presumptuous.
Yeah.
So she wouldn't do that.
Yeah.
So that's where character comes in.
Right.
So a person who would do that is more presumptuous than Diane is.
Mm-hmm.
So when I come to the play, the words, people don't pay any attention to the title. They don't pay any attention to the setting. They don't pay any attention to the characters' names. It's named George. It could be Bill. It could be ex-Murgatroyd. It makes no difference. That's just what they call it in the play. They don't pay attention to any of those things. They just take them as givens. And so ex-Murgatroyd comes in now and says, I'll never be anybody until I shoot the president. Oh, this is now about somebody who's going to shoot the president. No. It's a guy who's always shooting off his mouth, who's always saying, things that are totally beyond his control. He feels nobody cares about it. I'm saying that kind of a situation would elicit that.
Mm-hmm.
It's not, I'm going to shoot the president. So when you come to a play, there's no narrative to tell you, no narrative for the reader to tell you what it means, what these people mean. And since people in life never say just online what I mean, obviously a good playwright puts people into the play, which means what they are saying they don't mean. They're using those words to express something of their current moment, life. Here's an example. You're both heading to classes. You pass another teacher who you speak to. You say, hello, how you doing? Who means how are you doing? If that person stops and says, wait a minute, let me tell you. 30 minutes ago, I was doing fine until I got here, but 30 minutes ago, you didn't ask them for all that. You're on your way to class. All you said is, how you doing? And when they stop to tell you how to do it, you want to say, shut up, I'm going to class. So how are you doing does not mean, how are you doing? That's a question which is saying, how are you doing? From which the other person is supposed to say, fine, I'll see you later. Because they're also going to class. But if now they're going to burden you down with several things, oh, that's unsettling. You don't want to hear all of that. I'm trying to go teach my class at 9 o'clock. And the play opens up. It is 9:01 a.m. Ex-Murgatroyd comes in the front door, heads up the stairs. So-and-so, who's been upstairs in the bathroom, comes down the stairs, headed to one main where she's going to teach. Ex-Murgatroyd says, hi, how you doing? Actor comes in to play that, or director comes in to direct that, so he must be interested in her. So he stops her and says, how are you doing?
Which is not what happened in life.
Totally wrong.
No.
Misinterpreted. You can't say that's another interpretation. All it is I'm acknowledging your presence. I've done it. You go your way and I'll go mine. But the play doesn't tell you that. It may say sneeringly. It may say quickly. There are little clues sometimes. But he doesn't write a whole thing which says, in this thing, he is trying to keep it quiet that he has a lover. So his wife shouldn't find out. Comes in the room. Where were you? Well, I stopped at the bar to get a drink on the way home. It's Tuesday night. Since when do you drink on Tuesday night? I only felt that I wanted a drink. Now, she's not saying, hi, how are you? She's saying, where the fuck have you been? You coming home late. When it's Tuesday night, you just left work. He's saying, I don't want to tell her I was fucking my mistress, so I have to lie. Well, I stopped by for the drink. And if he's a smart liar, after he fucked his mistress, he'll stop by for a drink, so that now he'll tell her what he thinks is the truth, or what he can at least believe in. He doesn't say, I was captured by moon men and they took me to the planet Venus. No, he'll try to tell something that's partially true.
Mm-hmm. So you were going to tell me why you put the play in above importance of the novel. That's because it's encoded.
Yes.
And then the poem above, the most complicated above a play, is because...
That's because the texture of poetry, linguistically, is much more complicated.
Oh, okay. The language, yeah.
In other words, the texture of a poem is the texture of silk. Millions and millions of little bitty teeny strands interwoven. Mm-hmm. The texture of a play is like gabardine or like a suit. The texture of a novel is like a sweater. There's not thousands of threads, and there are holes that you can see through. It's much less densely created.
Right.
And poetry is denser. But the poet always wants you to get what his image is. He's not doing it for you not to understand. But the author of a play is not saying anything to you. He's having his characters talk, from which you should glean why he has them talk. Mm-hmm. But he doesn't tell you anything, except he calls it the country girl. He names her this. He says they're this age, etc., all down the line. So it's through this encoded piece of material. And since it's encoded, rather than straightforward. The message is not encoded. The person is telling you exactly what it is.
But in a play, the message is encoded.
Because the author you don't hear.
Mm-hmm.
The author doesn't say a fucking thing.
Right.
The author puts people on there who say what they say, from which you're supposed to deduce certain things.
Right.
It's not a straightforward presentation of information.
Right.
And every other kind of writing is. But that's the reason why people misinterpret plays, is because they haven't been shown how to correctly interpret them.
How to decode.
Yeah.
And read.
First of all, they don't recognize it needs to be decoded. Secondly, they don't know how to do it.